So it appears that we have a quorum of towns represented and can call the meeting to order at 5:31. Jim.
I got it. So you can take over for saying hello and worrying about the January 20 minutes.
Okay, so hello, I'm Janet Hurley, Chair of the Commission, and our first order of business is to approve minutes from our last meeting. Those were distributed by Jim pretty closely after the end of the last meeting, and I think we can either entertain a motion or just approve them by unanimous consent if there are no additions, subtractions, or comments. Any motion or comments, or should we just approve them by unanimous consent, Jim?
Whatever you would like. If we don't hear any
If we
objections.
don't hear any discontent, let's just approve them by unanimous consent.
No objection from here.
Okay,
Person here.
it sounds like that's what we can do.
Done. Thank you. So thanks, Janet. And I want to add my own welcome and thanks to everybody for coming, attending, participating, whatever we're doing with this Zoom thing. Zoom has been great. I'm kind of looking forward to getting back to in-person meetings, and and we'll talk a little bit more about that at the end of the meeting. But I do want to note that our annual meeting in May is going to be in-person / hybrid, and Janet et al. At the town of Manchester have generously agreed to host in their meeting room. So yeah, so we may actually see everybody if Omicron BA or whatever it is doesn't make an untimely appearance in our area. So that said, I'm really excited about this evening's meeting. We've got I think some really valuable information on some really important topics, important for residents and our quality of life in the area, important for community and economic development, just generally important for our communities. So we have both a presentation on childcare from the Let's Grow Kids and some information about what has been done and is being done on some of the Afghan refugee resettlement work through Bennington County Open Arms and others. We're going to start out with the presentation from Let's Grow Kids. So I'm going to turn it over to someone from Let's Grow Kids who's going to take the lead on that. Rex, maybe?
I'm happy to unmute myself, but I'd like to introduce Emily Tannenbaum, our Chief of External Affairs, and Drake Turner, our Senior Policy Manager, who will be providing most of what we have to share with you. And I'll tag on at the end to explain what people can do. So I'll leave it to Drake and Emily. Thank you. We're delighted to be here.
Thank you, Rex, and welcome, Emily, and looking forward to hearing from you guys.
Yes, thank you all so much for having us. Good evening. I too look forward to engaging back in person. It would have been a long drive tonight, but it would have been worth it to see everybody in person. But I appreciate you all making some time on this calendar and this meeting to hear a little bit more about the child care campaign. I'm going to try and be brief and then kick it over to Drake, who can share a little bit more about the policy details. My name is Emily. As Rex mentioned, I actually recently moved back to Vermont. I've been away for 15 years, so it's a nice homecoming for me. I do have a 6-year-old, almost 4-year-old, and a 4-month-old. So I am literally in the throes of the childcare system and navigating it. And I can tell you it is difficult. from personal experience and so many of the families that we talk to, it is not working for Vermont families. And so we are really here to kind of talk to you about the crisis, but also the solutions and really how you all can engage in your region to help us. And we really have started and launched this Vermont Child Care campaign because it became really evident in the throes of the pandemic how essential childcare is to not only the families that need the care, but also our economy and employers and businesses that really need the workforce and the workforce to be able to show up for work and recruit talent to the state. So our Vermont Child Care campaign is from parents to business leaders, partner organizations, and really from across the state, people are engaging with this campaign because it is just in not only in immediate crisis, but there is evidence that we really need to focus on the long-term solution and work on some systems change here. We are working to focus on creating a sustainable and accountable and efficient childcare system that is high quality and equitably accessible to every child in Vermont, which means that families are going to be able to find and afford the care they need when they need it. Right now, 3 out of 5 of Vermont's youngest children don't have the access to the care that they need. And when families can find the care, it's unaffordable. Our early educators are also struggling to make ends meet. They show up every day for these children and they do not make a fair wage. So a lot of our work is focused on making sure that our early educators are fairly compensated. What we see here with the childcare system is a market failure, right? Parents can't afford to pay any more, and we need to pay these educators more and a livable wage so that they can show up for our children, and they are the backbone of our workforce. They are the workforce behind the workforce that is allowing everybody else to go to work. We obviously know that there's long-term solutions are hard when you're in the middle of a crisis. So in the immediate term, we're really focused on emergency investments in Vermont's early educator workforce, and Drake will talk a little bit more about that. But in order to fully solve this childcare crisis, we are looking for long-term public investments in a strong and stable childcare system that meets the needs of Vermont's children's, families, businesses, and our greater economy. So whether we're looking for the short-term gains or the long-term solutions, investing in childcare is really the single most best investment we can make for a brighter future for our state. We are working with our partners and on policy change to transfer Vermont's childcare system from the ground up and looking at ways we can affect policy change at the state level. We elevate passionate voices of Vermonters across the state, and we are really preparing and readying the childcare system for this significant public investment that we know this system so desperately needs. When all of Vermont's young children, their families can access and afford childcare, we know that our job is done, and we have set the goal for 2025 to be our kind of barometer of when we would like to see the system in place and the public investment that we need to make it work. So we believe that by working together with communities and people across the state and organizations that we can rally together and achieve this goal by 2025. And we are preparing now, and Jake is going to talk to you a little bit about what that looks like. We've already passed a bill last legislative session, 171, that put in place 2 twin goals. One is, as I talked about, preparing, for fairly compensating early educators, and also that no family will pay more than 10% of their income. And we'll get into that a little bit more, but we're just really excited to come here and talk to you today about the importance of childcare, and really excited to learn about ways that you all would like to get more involved. So I will kick it over to Drake, who has all the exciting updates from our state house, where we've been able to be in person and interacting with legislators, and I'm really excited to hear from Drake. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, Emily. And hi, everyone. My name's Drake. I'm the Senior Policy Manager at Let's Grow Kids. Normally, I'd be in Montpelier right now. So I'm actually kind of happy to have an excuse to work from home today to see you all. It's very, very hectic and tense in Montpelier at the moment. We're approaching the midpoint of the legislative session. So everything has to either cross over from the House to the Senate or from the Senate to the House. a lot of budget conversations happening. There's actually a conversation happening at this very moment in the House Appropriations Committee about a proposal to invest more money in our childcare financial assistance program. So hopefully there will be good news on that front. But I want to talk to you all a little bit about what we've been working on this year and how it kind of fits into, as Emily mentioned, our overall strategy and vision for a transformed childcare system. So I'm going to pop a couple of links into the chat, and then I also will share my screen just for a moment to look at a couple of slides. And then we'll have Rex give a little bit of an update on actions that folks can take now. And then I'm also hopeful that we'll have some time for questions. So I'm going to try to make this brief. But one thing I think might be helpful for this group is a one-pager that we've created that's kind of our roadmap to transforming Vermont's childcare system. So the link that I just popped into the chat will take you to a page that kind of shows you the arc of what we're really planning for. So last year, as Emily mentioned, there was a significant bill that the legislature passed, H-171, which is now Act 45, invested a substantial amount in our childcare system. There were investments in family affordability. There were investments in workforce supports for early childhood educators. And that bill also put in place a couple of really important studies to look at what a transformed childcare system would cost, how we can fund that system, and then what's the best way to govern that childcare system. So there was some immediate work, and then really that bill has also paved the way for the future transformation of the system. So I want to also share my screen shortly. Hang on one moment. Great, can everyone see a slide here? Okay, no one says no. I'm gonna assume we're all good. Great. Got a new computer today, so I was a little nervous that this would not work out, but I think we're all good. Great, so as Emily mentioned, we have a childcare crisis in Vermont. It's significant, we need to change it. And we're also gonna send around these slides after the meeting, so don't feel like you have to internalize this at the moment. And we know that the childcare system of the future is going to be accessible, it's going to be affordable, it will be equitable, it's going to be really high quality, and it's also a system that will be accountable to stakeholders and sustainable over the long term. And so what I mentioned about that, that bill that passed last year was, in addition to the investments I mentioned, it also has set 2 goals for our future childcare system. So we'll know we're successful when families in Vermont are spending no more than 10% of their income on childcare. Now that figure is closer to 30% or even more, even with financial assistance, and we just know that's not sustainable. And we also know that a transformed childcare system will mean that our early childhood educators are well compensated and well supported. So that's the big picture vision. And if you clicked on the link in the chat, in 2023, we are planning pursuing a large investment to really do the work of transforming the childcare system. So the studies that were passed as part of H-171 will have concluded. The legislature will have information on what needs to happen, what it will cost, and what different funding options are. And then we're really planning a big push in 2023 to do the work of that large scale transformation and really achieve these 2 goals. But we are now in 2022, so that is the work of the next biennium, but there still is really important work for us to do right now. So our policy agenda this year, and I will stop my screen share in just a moment so I can pop another link into the chat, but we're really focused on 2 main components this year for our policy agenda. So we need to continue to make progress toward long-term transformation and continue the work that was set out in H-171 last year. And I'll go through what that means in just a moment. But we also know, and it really came to light starting last fall, that there's a staffing crisis in childcare programs across Vermont. As Emily mentioned, early childhood educators are making very little money, especially when compared to their skills and qualifications. And it's really, really difficult for folks to stay in the field right now. They're working with the last unvaccinated population. They're really tired. A lot of these folks have been working since the earliest days of the pandemic, providing emergency care for the children of essential workers. And it's a really tough job, especially when you are not making enough to be able to support yourself or your own family. So a lot of folks are finding that they can make more money doing almost any other job in Vermont. And we know that this is incredibly essential work. It's also really hard work and requires a lot of skill and expertise. So we found a lot of programs are losing staff or they're having a really hard time hiring enough staff and bringing more folks on. And that's impacting a lot of decisions that programs are having to make about their hours of operation, whether they're able to stay open at all, how to navigate closing classrooms or dealing with close contacts when it comes to the pandemic. So we last fall worked with programs from all across the state and a lot of our partner organizations to determine, in this moment where we're really looking to address compensation in a long-term way in 2023, because that's really what's going to move the long-term way. That's a little feedback. All right, can folks mute themselves? I think I might be getting a little feedback there. Thank you. So while we wait for the results of these studies to come back and when we can have that conversation in 2023 about how we make sure our early childhood education workforce is fairly compensated and well supported, what can we do now to support early childhood educators with one-time emergency investments to keep people in the field and also to recruit more folks to the field? So I will stop my share here and I can talk a little bit more about what the details of these components are. On one moment, I have one more link to share. See people do this in a much more sophisticated way than I ever am able to. Here, so this link in the chat is our one pager on our policy agenda. So when it comes to the first component that I mentioned, the long-term transformation, we're really focused on doing our part to ensure continued implementation of H-171. So one of the pieces of the bill that I kind of alluded to, but wasn't funded in that bill, there was a childcare financing study. Then a lot of ways was the heart of that bill. It will look at what it costs to achieve those goals of no family spending more than 10% of their income and a well-compensated and supported workforce. What's the number? How do we dig into that? And then what are the different options that the legislature has available for them to fund that? We need to make sure that that study happens. And actually, there's some good news on that front. The governor yesterday signed the 2022 Budget Adjustment Act, which includes language authorizing that study to move forward. So we're really excited about that. And the results of that study will be in January of 2023, just in time for the next legislative session. And we're also focused on creating a childcare capacity development program. So putting in statute work that really already is happening across the state, help programs start up, expand, and remain viable. So we're continuing to work on that. And then when it comes to emergency supports for our early childhood education workforce, you see on that one pager, that link I put in the chat, that there is a whole suite of options, because when we were talking with programs and partners last fall, we just sort of said, like, let's throw everything on the wall and see what sticks to what could support the workforce right now. And what rose to the top is the need for retention bonuses for early childhood educators, more money in the pockets of these professionals doing this work to help them stay in the field and really validate that they are important to us and that this work is valued by the state. And there is, in the Budget Adjustment Act I just mentioned, $6 million in federal funds to support a round of retention bonuses to childcare workers, which is really exciting and wonderful. But we've also looked into, can we support early childhood educators with their healthcare costs through premium assistance? Is there a way to expand the student loan repayment program for early childhood educators that was passed last year to cover more folks' degrees? Is there a way we can support early childhood educators with their own childcare costs? Because a lot of folks in the field are struggling to pay for care for their own children, and a lot of other creative benefits, including the establishment of an early childhood education recruitment campaign, so that we as a state are doing really coordinated work to bring folks into the field and support them in gaining their credentials and all of the things that you need to be a successful early childhood educator. So there's a lot going on. A lot of these pieces are in different places within the legislative process. We're really excited about the wins that we've had so far on funding the financing study and also those retention bonuses, but we also have a whole half that does not make any sense. The second half of the legislative session is still ahead of us. We're working really hard to elevate the voices of early childhood educators and families in the State House. And we're also really lucky to have a lot of champions in the legislature and in the administration who know how important this is, and in communities all across Vermont. So we're really excited about the work there's a lot going on. There are a lot of competing priorities in the State House, but we're feeling really, I think, energized and ready to make sure we can secure what's needed for the field right now. And I will leave it there. Rex, would you like me to share my screen again to show that last slide?
Sure, if you'd like, and I'll be, thank you. So that everyone knows, I'm the regional field manager for Bennington County for Let's Grow Kids, which means I help organize people who are saying, I want to be part of this. I want to provide some support. I'd like to be involved. And so my job is to help you know, and there are two links in the chat right now. One is, as a business, you can endorse the child care campaign. And the other is, personally, you can sign the petition. And there's nothing to stop you from doing both. In fact, you can do more than those two things, and I'm happy to help you explore what that is. But those are the two key things that will help most. We need to have the legislature understand businesses are behind this. Businesses understand that this workforce is what supports their workforce. And personally, sign on to the petition. You'll hear back from me if you give me a contact information in that, and we'll sort out what else you might be able to do. But we need to have more and more people involved so that the legislature understands this is something that must be completed. Thank you. I think we should open it to questions now.
Yeah, we are, any one of us that are here and willing to accept, if there's time, Jim, I'm not sure what.
Yeah, sure, absolutely, we have time. And if people have questions, I can try to keep an eye out for a real or virtual hand. Although you might have to make some noise since everybody doesn't fit on one page of my screen. So I have a question. I like to say when I'm talking with childcare folks that I think I may have mentioned this to Rex, is like I was the president of a childcare organization 30 years ago, and I worked on their first budget at that time. And guess what our problems were at that time? It was making the programs affordable for families and trying to pay a reasonable wage for our employees. And so it's interesting that those things are still with us today. And I really appreciate what you're doing. The question I have is what kind of, because one of our biggest challenges in the state, and this is a part of it, but one of our huge challenges in the state and certainly in our region is workforce availability. So I'm wondering, there's obviously a direct connection here, and I'm wondering what kind of support or participation you're getting from the business community and economic development organizations.
You want me to jump in, Drake? I'll do the high level, and then Drake usually comes in with some great details. So we're seeing great participation. We're, we've been speaking to groups like yours across the state, and folks are really, it's no accident that everyone's talking about workforce right now. It is a huge crisis. I think we just saw, we have one of them, I think we're, if not the top, one of the top states in the country for job availability, job slots available. And so we know that the jobs are here. And so I think there's a couple of ways we look at the workforce, right? Like we want to make sure that families who are not able to be in the workforce right now and want to be due to childcare issues, we want to make sure that they have the childcare they need to get back in the workforce. And that also that employers are able to retain the employees that they have and that people are not leaving the workforce due to childcare challenges. So those are two things. And then we also know that when we invest in the system and we are able to recruit the teachers that we need in the system, we know that we will be able to create, upwards of 2,000 jobs just in the early education space alone. So that's the job creation piece that we say in this industry. We also see obviously the workforce challenges at a very high level in terms of the retention and recruitment that companies are able to do. So, and then when we look at the big, 30,000 foot view is that when we hope that this system and we really view it as being, as Vermont does, we feel a little exceptionalism here, that we want to be the first one to do this and we want to do it right. We want to be a model for the rest of the country. And when we are able to do that, that we will be able to recruit into this state in a way that we've never been able to before. And so when I was looking at moving back to my home state, childcare and housing, right? Those were the two things that I really looked at. And I think so there's just you ask a good question, Jim, and there's just so many facets to that. And yes, business communities are coming together, business leaders are coming together, and they really are seeing childcare as that lever that we can pull to kind of be the workforce solution of our time. And I really see it that way. I've worked in economic development and when I was in New Orleans, and I really think that childcare is one of the key investments we can make to help solve the workforce challenges we're seeing. I don't know, Drake, you might have some more to add on the specifics.
That was great. The only thing I would add is that I've been with Let's Grow Kids for a little over 2 years now. And I remember it was literally like 2 months before the pandemic started, I started. And even at that point, we were seeing just a greater understanding in the business community of the importance of childcare. And that was before the pandemic really made it just even clearer to folks all across Vermont in all sectors of the economy that our childcare crisis is exacerbating our workforce crisis and a lot of other crises that the state is facing. And just from my window into the legislature, workforce development is one of the key priorities of this legislative session, right? Something that, across committees, across both chambers, everyone's focused on. And of course, folks in communities really are. And as we've paid attention to a lot of conversations in the House Commerce and Economic Development Committee, who's been working on a really comprehensive workforce development bill, I would say almost without exception, every witness that they've heard from the business community across sectors, across the state, has mentioned childcare as one of their key workforce challenges, lack of childcare for their employees. So I think we know more than ever, I think this is something that the business community really understands is holding Vermont back from improving workforce participation. So I think we feel really lucky to have the support and partnership of the business community to make sure that the solutions that we're advancing through policy change are really going to move the needle in a positive way for our economy.
Great, thanks. I see Grace Winslow has her hand up.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks, Jim. I'm like the crossover speaker today. I work in childcare. I'm also part of Bennington County Open Arms. And I just wanted to say thank you to Let's Grow Kids. None of you were actually here working for Let's Grow Kids when it first started, but I remember when it first started and everybody went, oh, that's nice. That's crazy, but it's nice. Aren't they cute? And now what a force you have been for change, because working in childcare, you see how hard these people work, and mostly women. And you realize that when you look at the data, they also tend to have a very high rate of anxiety and depression. And they're dealing with parents who are chronically angry, because when you deal with children, that parents get upset. But even just sending them home for, like nowadays, sending them home for a runny nose, that's a big battle sometimes. So I just want to say how valuable Let's Grow Kids has been to this state. And also we're actually asking our teachers who have high rates of anxiety and depression to also deal with a lot more kids who have trauma. In Head Start, we have early Head Start, the 0 to 3-year-olds. We have more than 50% of our classrooms, more than our special needs. They have IFSPs. So it's significant. It's a significant, important piece of work. And I wanted to ask Let's Grow Kids, what are you doing for the people who are part of childcare but are not childcare workers? They're not like teachers in the classroom. Because I'll tell you, we had one day without a cook, and we had 18 people doing the cooking for one person. So we'd like to see that reimbursed a little bit better too.
Yeah, that's a great question, Grace. And thank you for what you do. And thank you for those kind words. I can speak to this a little bit because I think you're exactly right. We talk a lot about early childhood educators, but we want to make sure that everyone who's working as staff in childcare programs is supported and is included in, the vision that we have for the system. So one example, and there's a lot more that we are working on right now when it comes to, what are we envisioning for a pay scale, or how are we really going to fulfill that goal of a well-compensated and well-supported workforce? But one small example of this was the retention bonuses that I mentioned that just passed as part of BAA. It originally was written as retention bonuses for early childhood educators. And we realized that was going to leave folks out of that financial support, bus drivers, cooks, support staff. So we were able to change, and we worked with folks in the legislature to change the language around those retention bonuses so that it will encompass all staff and programs. So I think, it's something that we want to make sure we're not leaving folks out, because everyone doing this work deserves to, make a fair wage and be supported and be included. I think that's work that is being done and that will need to continue to be done, so that we're not creating an inequitable system for the workforce.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Do we have any other questions out there? And if I don't see your hand, you can just sing out. Well, we're right about 6 o'clock, so we're right about on schedule, and I want to thank you for that. And we will be providing all this information in our minutes and on our website, and so people will be able to get in touch with you, and at least in touch with Rex, so everybody will sign your petition, right? So great.
Thank you so much, Jim. And yes, please be in touch with Rex. He is your main man for all things childcare in the area, and we really rely on him to do anything. I say anything. He can do anything, but really engage with you all in the campaign and kind of meet where you all are and how you want to be engaged in the campaign. So Rex, thank you so much for organizing this and connecting us, and we're so excited about the work ahead.
Okay, if I could just say one more thing. Let's Go Kids is an organization. We're stationed in Burlington, but we work across the state, as you all know, but we are not the focus of what this is all about. And we are not what accomplished all this. There are 40,000 strong people in the state who are saying we are behind this. It's you signing on, and what can you do? That's what's driving this forward. The legislature won't listen to us, but they really want to hear from you. So thank you for being here. Thank you for signing on. And I'm just really excited to work with whoever says, hey, tell me what to do. I'll help. Thanks.
Thank you, Rex. And yes, I heard about this Let's Grow Kids locally from Dimitri Garter, who was a very strong vocal advocate. So you have some really good friends in the area too. So thank you. Great. So let's move on. I did want to mention, since I forgot to mention earlier, that we have a part 3 of the program too. Callie Fishburne is going to have some really valuable information for towns, especially on the current situation with ARPA funding. Just some quick updates at the end of the meeting. So don't everybody run away after the next meeting, after the next session rather. But speaking of the next session, really excited to have folks, Grace, and good transition, you're right, super segue, and Brian Dalton from Bennington County Open Arms, who we've interacted with a little bit and have been doing some really great work on in the refugee resettlement front. So I know I'm really interested to hear more about what you folks have been doing and what your plans are for the future. So I will just turn it over to you.
My name is Grace Winslow. I am one of the 2 coordinators for Bennington County Open Arms, and although there are 2 coordinators, I have to say Brian is like our phantom 3rd coordinator. His spouse, Ananda Rupa, is the other coordinator. We started meeting, well, we first met actually, first met ever on July, just before the 4th of July of last summer. And sat down at a coffee shop and hammered out what our vision was. And it was not to bring refugees into the area. It was actually to support undocumented immigrants on the southern border. Sorry, Charles? Thank you. When Afghanistan sort of started to fall apart in July, and we knew that we would have refugees coming from Afghanistan, we sort of did a pivot because of community interest in us doing that. And it was not, and instead of, it was probably in addition to, we just can only do one thing at a time. So it may be that we will go back to wanting to open our arms to refugees from, asylum seekers from the southern border, but not at this time. And I think that was it. Oh, and I'm so sorry. I was supposed to open with this. Callie and Kat have been a wonderful addition to Bennington County Open Arms, as was Jake Gessling when he was here. They have been so busy helping our, and here's one of the most important things about refugee resettlement, helping our refugees feel at home. Because, you know, you can do all the forms, you can do all the, you know, get them to dental appointments and stuff like that. But making them feel at home is what Callie and Kat and Jake have really done. And we really have appreciated that.
My name is Brian Dalton. My husband, Anaruba, and Grace are the co-leaders. I am a retired diplomat from the U.S. Department of State with background working on refugees and immigrants, but this has been my on-ground experience. Just wanted to say, as a segue from the last group, from those polished presentations, I'd say we have more of a grassroots feel to how we work. I want to explain the big picture. The U.S. government's refugee resettlement program is within the U.S. Department of State. Department of Homeland Security admits the people, but the State Department then works with 9 accredited agencies across the country to resettle them. And one of those, the Ethiopian Community Development Council, just opened a new affiliate in Brattleboro in the fall. It was in the press because the state of Vermont, the governor's office, as well as Brattleboro's development, BDCC, wanted to include refugee resettlement as part of the vision of growing the workforce and the economy and diversity and all sorts of good things. And it just struck me listening to Let's Grow Kids, as we're dealing with 4 families here. So far, we've only been able to really work on employing, you know, one of the 2 parents. But if we had robust childcare, we could potentially have 8 workers helping meet the workforce needs in this area. So ECDC has signed an MOU with Bennington County Open Arms. We have nonprofit status, but not 501c3 status. We're under the fiscal sponsorship of the Dorset Church in Dorset, Vermont. And we signed an agreement with ECDC that we would co-sponsor settling the families in Bennington, and we'll get into the details of what that looks like. I want to flag that you will be hearing that in Northern Vermont, the U.S. Committee on Refugees and Immigrants is resettling Afghans in the northern part of the state. They've got a new office in Rutland, which is doing the same. You will also hear of private sponsors, including in Bennington County. So any individual or group of people who has the will and the money and the time can also help resettle refugees. My 3 last points on this point: you will hear terminology in the press and in discussion of these new arrivals. Almost all the Afghans that arrived last summer, the tens of thousands that were first housed in military bases, were given what's called humanitarian parole. That's a catch-all basket category the State Department can admit somebody under, and they've got 2 years to be here legally, during which time they need to find another status to adjust to, or they need to leave the country. You will also have heard the SIVs, the interpreters, those who work as direct employees or close employees to the US government in Afghanistan would qualify for actual immigrant visas, which are a direct line towards green cards and citizenship. And some of those who have come to Southern Vermont are them, be they former guards at the embassy, be they having been other employees or in the military closely allied to the US. They would qualify for that. The last thing that was just in the news yesterday is the administration extended temporary protected status to Afghans who were in the country, currently in the country, say as a student or a tourist or visiting family or business, and got stuck here. Their visas are going to expire and they're subject to being deported. So TPS covers them for the period granted by the administration, and that at the end of that period, they review the situation back in their home country. And so they may be extended. Over to you, Grace.
So we are a co-sponsorship group, which if you ever look at, if you check online for co-sponsorship circles, it is a circle, it's supposed to be a circle of people who provide support in the community. We do not do things like case management. We do things like find housing. We fill the house with furniture, we shop for groceries, fill the house with groceries so that they can eat for the first week or so. We ensure that they get to healthcare appointments. We help them find jobs. We help them learn how to get a job. We work with them around their education. The first thing we are doing is working with ESL. Actually, we work with the Tutorial Center to provide ESL classes through SIT. It's a little complicated there. We ensure that they have transportation and that they learn our public transportation so that they can get themselves to where they need to go and become gradually more and more independent. And we work on cultural adjustment. That's a lot of the things that the BCRC volunteers have been doing, is working on cultural adjustment and on the employment on those two fronts particularly. So we are the BCOA is a co-sponsorship circle, but we happen to have at this point in time 4 families. So really we have 7 volunteers for each of the families that we are sponsoring, so that we've got somebody who's working on housing, someone on health, someone on employment, education, transportation, cultural adjustment. But because we're such a large co-sponsorship circle, we can sort of mix and mingle so that one family might have Callie and me, and another family might also have Callie and Kat, so that Callie and Kat are not assigned to just one family. But we do have the ability to have enough volunteers so that every family has one person in each of those sections, so that they can get some really personal, more involved attention to their needs. We have co-sponsorship circles work with ECDC as a resettlement organization. So ECDC has a national office. The local office of ECDC is in Brattleboro. And we are the co-sponsorship circle for the Bennington County area. So it's sort of a national office, local office, co-sponsorship circle, and then multiple co-sponsorship circles within that configuration. Right now, there are 94 individuals served by ECDC in Southern Vermont, and that most of them are in Brattleboro. So far they have 94. We do expect another wave to be coming, and that wave would consist of people who are relatives of the folks who are here. So for example, a family comes and one of their sons is still in Afghanistan, and they are waiting for that child to come here. Or there are a lot of people who came over as single people. They're not single as in unmarried. They're single as in they are one person from a family. And very often they will have other family members, like a man comes over and has left his wife and children in Afghanistan. So that's the second wave they're expecting, is those family members. Some flights have already begun in the past week. So we anticipate that those people will be coming soon. We don't know when, but soon. In finding employment for the families, we have one gentleman who is already at work. He started work, I think, 2 weeks ago. And we have another person who will be going to work starting Monday. And the next 2 families will have individuals from their families starting work, we hope, in the next few weeks. First on their list of things to do, though, is start to learn a little more English, because it's hard to have any kind of employment in the US without having some grasp of at least basic English. And the 2 that are already placed in positions are actually the 2 with the best English skills. Back to Brian.
As Grace said, we're required to have at least 7 people for each of the families. In fact, we have about 40 plus what we call core volunteers who have had a background check with the State of Vermont Criminal Records Center and gone through a 4-hour training for the ECDC around things like responsible and ethical interactions with refugees, and making sure that we're treating all of them equitably, preparing emotionally for dealing with people who have been uprooted from their homes and are adjusting to a new place that they did not choose, kind of at 2 levels. The people who were maybe applying for special immigrant visas did have a vision of their futures to be in America, but the vast majority did not. They were living in Afghanistan one day and then suddenly they weren't. And then the next level is the people who who get assigned to Vermont are ones who didn't have family or professional connections elsewhere in the United States. None of them knew where Vermont was before they came here. We're happy to report that we're getting some nice feedback that they are enjoying what they're encountering here. But I remember driving them across New Hampshire from Manchester Airport to get here. And after a couple hours, the gentleman turned to me and said, "There are no people here." So they're adjusting to the realities of time around here. In addition to the activities Grace mentioned, we've been able to connect with a mosque as a network of mosques in the Albany area. And those of the new arrivals who've wanted to have been able to go over there and interact with their faith community, also meet some Afghans, find the Afghan grocery store that's in Latham, and be able to get food that's familiar, which the cultural adjustment specialists really point to as a key element to starting to feel at home, kind of in a new home way of, living in an American house with American appliances that we walk through step by step, but also feeling at home, like I can live my real life here. Daycare, you did mention, but it's been a recurring issue for the families here, who most of whom have small kids. It was done that way intentionally, that families with small kids would be here, families with older kids and single people would be in Brattleboro, so that they'd have commonality among each other. We have come to appreciate the Bennington County public transportation, that the Green Mountain Express bus can get them to where they need to be going. And job search has been facilitated by the fact that they've been able to use the bus to get to and from work. So that's was a nice discovery for me, who have not been using public transportation. Grace.
The last thing we want to talk about is the partners that we've had in the community resources we have been supported by. Of course, BCRC has helped us with Jake originally connected our Afghans to local resources, and he taught our volunteers how to use Time Tree and other technical things. Talked to one of them at great length about how to get an iPhone, and found a good deal for them. And that was shortly before he had to leave. And Callie and Kat, of course, are helping with housing and jobs and cultural adjustment. So we really appreciate BCRC support. We have had other really wonderful partners. Second Congregational Church was our first support, our first financial donor. And even before we had a place to put the money, they were donating to us. And they have been allowing us to use their space for the ESL classes, which is a significant gift. And as a result, I think a lot of our new neighbors feel a little bit at home walking there and using that space. So that's been really wonderful. Dorset Church has been a fiscal sponsor. We have lots of supporters from the Dorset Church that they've been just absolutely wonderful to us. The Vermont Community Foundation is actually one of our biggest contributors. I think they might be our single biggest contributor from their various pockets of, I don't want to say pockets of money, but grants that they have been able to find. The Tutorial Center has been a huge gift to us. I know that it's community supported, and we have appreciated how much they have done, and they've been very flexible in flexing their schedules so that they can meet the needs of the Afghans that we're supporting. And even little things like, well, not so little, but the Banner has provided free subscriptions and tablets for the families, which is a great thing. We actually accepted the tablets today, so the families don't actually know that they're coming yet, or maybe they know, but they haven't been installed. St. James Church has been a really strong supporter. We've just had really a groundswell of people from the community who have been wonderful, really wonderful, with both donations of money, donations of goods, volunteering their time, volunteering little bits of time or lots of time. We've had lots of people who came into this thinking, well, I'll just be a little bit involved. And after they meet the families, they're just like, I am really all in. So that has been really nice to see. The Afghans that we have welcomed to this community are by definition, because of what they have done to get here, they are determined, brave, intelligent, wonderful human beings. We cannot say that they're similar in other ways, because just like the difference between me and Brian, we are not the same. You really can't say all Americans are just like Grace and Brian, because Grace and Brian are not alike. And similarly, the Afghans are the same. Some of them are very outgoing, some of them are very private, some of them are older, a little younger, a little more conservative, a little less conservative. So they're all over the place, but this is like the best thing I've ever done in my whole life. So, and if there are any questions, please feel free to ask.
And before we get to questions, just want to jump in. You may be wondering, so what is it that y'all want from us? We thank you for your continued support from BCRC and in the communities that all of you commissioners represent. We do have volunteers probably from most, if not all, of your towns. And before we committed to this, we wondered, socially, how would Afghan asylum applicants be welcome in southwestern Vermont, and the response has been incredible. So I would still say out there, we ask for your continued, I would say, social support, meaning that this is a welcoming area, and that has many manifestations, from help on the housing and employment front, and the banner, for example, signaling their support for their social integration and their language acquisition with these subscriptions is one of the many examples that we've gotten from these institutional supporters. And any individuals who want to volunteer, we can still take more volunteers. The more volunteers we have, the more we can possibly consider co-sponsoring more families. People are now asking, what about Ukrainians? So though that may be coming down the way, but there are still thousands of Afghans in military camps who have not yet been assigned somewhere, and they need a place to go. So back to questions.
Great. So yes, happy to entertain any questions. Great presentation, by the way, guys. That was actually pretty polished, I have to say. Really, really informative. Thank you.
I'm wondering if Brian and Grace can talk about housing and how you secured housing for your participants.
In theory, I've got the housing sign around my neck, but it's really been an all-out effort. I will say it's all been word of mouth so far. Nothing through advertisements has panned out. Everything from it got snatched up to, frankly, cold calling the owners, and when they hear refugee or VRAP, emergency rental assistance, they don't call back. It's been individuals who hear the story and say, yes, I want my rental unit to be put to this purpose, and they have endured the uncertainties and the new procedures involved with the state's wonderful support, providing up to 18 months of rental and utilities support, like any Vermonter who's been affected by COVID, and you all are more familiar than even us with those programs, and VRAP and Reach Up's emergency rental assistance. But for all of the landlords, this has been new territory, and they've been very patient and willing to learn and hold out longer. So that has been a learning curve. We've had some of the larger renters be willing, but couldn't find a way to bridge their standard procedures to the particularities of this population, be they a family-owned large rental company or a more corporate one that they want to, and they've been willing to talk to us and try to figure out something out. We didn't need it right away, but were we able to cross those bridges, we might get a little further. And we've had some conversations with the BCRC around that, and I think going forward we may do that. And last thing, it won't surprise any of you, the the further north you go in Bennington County, the harder it is to find housing, and further south, it's still hard, but there's more options.
Great, thank you. Other questions? No, well, I know that we all appreciate what you're doing, and we will all we'll all keep our eyes and ears open, look for opportunities to support your good work. So thanks again, and I'm sure we will continue to interact. So thanks, Brian. Thank you, Grace.
Thank you to BCRC for your support. Thanks.
Ditto that. Thank you, Jim, and thank you all of you.
I see you,
Great,
Kat.
And so yes, without further ado, right, continuing to be right on schedule, let me turn it over to Callie Fishburne, who is one of our ARPA points of contact that helps funnel information on that, the American Rescue Plan Act to our municipal officials. So there have been some recent updates, and just want to make sure everybody is aware of those. So Callie, take it away.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Can everyone see my slides? All right. So this is going to be as you can probably see in the view here, it's going to be a quick and dirty presentation just on some ARPA updates around the Department of Treasury's final rule. So we're taking a hard shift from what we've previously been discussing at this meeting with some great information about childcare and refugee resettlement. So hard shift into ARPA. So this is just a quick graphic that I made to show the ARPA distribution of funds, specifically going down to Vermont's share and then Bennington County's share. So that's the approximate total amount of money that all municipalities in Bennington County have received. So the final rule from the Department of Treasury was issued in early January of this year. It replaces the interim final rule, which Treasury had issued previously when, ARPA was, the American Rescue Plan Act was first passed and the money was first distributed. So the final rule takes effect on April 1st of 2022, but municipalities who have received ARPA funding can choose to follow the final rule now with no penalty. There are several updates in the final rule that are, different from what was in the interim final rule for the use of ARPA funds. But the biggest, I think, difference that has the most impact to all of your communities is that municipalities can now claim a standard revenue loss of up to $10 million and use it to fund their government services. So for all of you, no municipality in Bennington County received more than $10 million. So for all of you, that would be your municipality's entire ARPA award. So you could essentially claim your entire ARPA award as revenue loss and use it for the provision of government services. So you all might have remembered there was a huge expenditure category sheet that the Treasury Department had released previously that had like 60 something expenditure categories on it. It was a little bit daunting. Previously, municipalities had to very specifically identify, eligible activities that fit within those categories. And if they wanted to do lost revenue, they had to do a complicated calculation to actually determine the exact amount of revenue loss that they suffered. But now you don't need to do that. You can just claim a standard loss of up to $10 million. And you don't need to, your community, your municipality doesn't need to prove that by doing a revenue loss calculation. It's just assumed. So that's really, I think, the biggest change. And I'm sure many of you who are representing municipalities are already aware of this, but I think it's just important to remind people about it because in some cases it does seem a little bit too good to be true, but it is true. So The first project and expenditure report for ARPA is due on April 30th, 2022. So that's coming up. When filling out this report, your municipality will have the option to make a one-time irrevocable decision to claim that standard revenue loss of up to $10 million, not to exceed the award amount that you received, and use that to pay for government services. And this information is all coming from VLCT's final rule analysis that they did, that goes more into detail about some of the changes and some recommendations from VLCT, but this is just a quick and dirty summary of it for you all. So some important reminders and some things that are still the same deal from before the final rule is that recipients, municipalities, you still have until the end of 2024 to obligate your funds, and the end of December 2026 to spend them. And municipalities are expected to receive their second ARPA payment this summer. So again, the first expenditure report is due on April 30th. VLCT recommends choosing the standard loss of up to $10 million, and this, just allows for greater flexibility and more streamlined reporting. The ineligible uses of ARPA funds are still the same as they were before. You can't use them to replenish pension funds, rainy day funds, or debt service, or satisfaction of settlements or judgments. And public engagement is still highly recommended, and VLCT definitely recommends it. They've actually just released a toolkit for communities who want to form ARPA committees, if that's something that you're interested in. And I just wanted to finish up with some quick information about some upcoming webinars and resources. So March 21st, so next week, the Department of Treasury is hosting a webinar on reporting requirements specifically for non-entitlement units of government, which would be all of the municipalities in Bennington County. And then on April 5th, VLCT is hosting their own webinar on the final rule and compliance and reporting. So since that first expenditure report is coming due at the end of April, I think would be very helpful for you to review those webinars if you're curious about specifically what compliance and reporting will require. And then there are just some links here. So when Jim sends out the resources from this meeting, it'll include the PowerPoint, and you can click on these links here. And they're all to ARPA information from the Vermont League of Cities and Towns. They've recently rearranged their ARPA information on their website. So there's a general page, there's a page about the final rule and their analysis. There's a new page about compliance and reporting specifically. And then they also have this new resource that I mentioned that is an ARPA Advisory Committee Formation Toolkit. So that was super quick. And I'm happy to take any questions that anybody might have.
Thanks, Callie. That was great. Actually, very clear and concise. So appreciate it. Any questions for Callie? And as she noted, we'll get that information out to everybody, and Callie and Allison are available in our office to respond to specific questions as well. So any questions at this time? I don't see or hear any, so I will take that as a no. But as I mentioned, as you get into the reporting and all, you may have some. So please keep us in mind. You know where to find us. So thank you. The last thing I wanted to mention, as I noted at the beginning of the meeting, the BCRC. According to our bylaws, has our annual meeting in May, and we've been a couple of years without having an in-person annual meeting, so we've just had a very rudimentary business meeting the last couple of years. So we're kind of morphing back into into a regular annual meeting, which always used to be something of a grand dinner meeting affair. It will be a more subdued dinner meeting affair. Janet and I are going to collaborate on getting some really good sandwiches. But we'll be having the meeting at the Manchester Town Hall meeting room, where there is an ability for people to Zoom in, and so we look forward to that. Our guest speaker is going to be Commissioner of the Department of Housing and Community Development, Josh Hanford, who is going to be talking about housing, the housing crisis, what is being done about it, resources that are available, new legislation that may be coming out of the session. There's quite a few housing bills currently going through the House and the Senate in Montpelier. So lots to talk about on the housing front, and should be a really interesting presentation and discussion at that meeting. We will also be getting back to awarding presenting the Bunk Arts Award for community service at that meeting as well. So getting back to semi-normal. I'm really looking forward to it, and to seeing some folks in person again. So yay.
And I'll just add, Jim, that this is your last annual meeting as executive director. So, people don't want to miss that.
Yeah, that's something to celebrate. So thanks, Janet. So we look forward to seeing everybody in May, and in the meantime, look for our regular communications, and feel free to call or drop in the office in Bennington anytime. So thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Yep.